3 sinister gas station encounters, revealed terrifying true stories that will haunt you forever. The clock ticked ominously towards midnight as Sarah settled into her shift at the gas station. The hum of the pumps and the flickering fluorescent lights cast peculiar shadows, stretching across the concrete like eerie fingers. She glanced at the door, the sudden rush of night outside sending chills up her spine. It wasn't the quiet suburb she wanted her daughter to grow up in. It felt alive in a way that made the hair on her neck rise. She would never admit it, but for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of dread, a feeling that something was out there, watching. Regulars shuffled through, murmuring about the dark folklore that seemed to hang over this place like a fog. The tall man with deep-set eyes lingered too long, recounting tales of a school that once stood nearby, where students disappeared into thin air, their screams lost in the ether. "You've heard about the girl, right?" he said, a smirk curling at his lips. "She vanished right from the gas station." Sarah felt trapped, her heart racing as a chilling thought broke into her mind. Was he hinting at something more? Jake, her co-worker, fidgeted at the cash register, stealing glances at the back entrance. He whispered cryptic comments that only amplified her paranoia. Every time the door swung open, Sarah's breath caught. Old legends were surfacing, and her instincts kicked into overdrive as the tension in the air thickened. Just another wild story, she dismissed, until the elderly woman entered, her frail hands shaking. "Be careful, dear. Those who come after the sun sets aren't right," she croaked, her eyes darting about, timid and alert. Sarah forced a chuckle but felt a chill settle over her. Then she noticed an article tucked behind the register, nearly invisible. Missing persons. One photo stood out almost identical to the tall man who just left. Panic surged, it was all too much. Just then, her phone rang. Lily's voice slipped through, sweet and innocent. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" The simple question turned her world upside down. How could she protect her daughter when she felt the walls closing in? The door swung open unexpectedly. A figure in black strode inside, eyes hidden behind a grotesque mask. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the oppressive air enveloping her. Sarah's instincts screamed to run as the looming figure moved closer, whispering horrible fragments of those very legends that haunted her mind. Before she could even think, she darted behind the shelves, chaos erupting around her. The figure advanced, soundlessly stalking her down the narrow aisles. Her heart raced like a drum. She was the hunted. "What do you want?" she gasped, words slipping out in a breathless panic. "Some say the stories are true," it whispered, voice muffled but palpable in the air. The words slithered around her, crawling under her skin, driving her deeper into a primal fear. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Sarah's mind raced. Thoughts of Lily filled her, mixing with the horror surrounding her. It was a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The safe world she'd created for her daughter morphed into a twisted game. Shoving past knocked-over bins and trembling shelves, she tried to breathe, to find her way out, but every turn felt claustrophobic. The figure loomed nearby, shadows stretching longer as it whispered, "They never returned." Was this the fate that awaited her? Would she become another story told to trembling patrons, pouring fuel under the watchful eye of the night? The tension surged, leaving no space for hope as Sarah felt the cold grasp of despair close around her throat. As darkness thickened, she glimpsed Jake's terrified expression before the lights flickered once more, revealing the depths of the fear awaiting her in the shadows. Would dawn ever break again for her and Lily? Sarah's breath caught, a scream caught in her throat. She was hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the gas station, each eerily amplified in the tense silence that followed the figure's chilling words. Panic surged through her veins, hardening her resolve. She had to escape, had to protect Lily, but the shadows were alive, swirling on the walls like dark phantoms mocking her. A sudden noise broke through her thoughts, the hiss of a pump igniting, yet she hadn't touched it. The figure moved closer, its presence oppressive and oppressive, pulsating with a dark energy that seemed to resonate with the very building. She skittered away, barely glancing back as she pushed aside a stack of sodas that tumbled to the ground with a loud crash. She winced at the sound, compounded by the silence that followed. "Stop running," it hissed, now just beyond the narrow aisle. The tone was almost playful, laced with malicious enjoyment. Adrenaline surged as she bolted toward the back door, her mind racing for options. She could escape to the darkness outside or perhaps to further depths of terror. In a moment of clarity, she seized the nearby emergency alarm. Her fingers fumbled with the button, boosting her courage. The shriek pierced the air, sending echoes through the empty lot outside. It was a desperate call into the night, a beacon of terror. She hoped someone would hear it, but the gnawing thought crept in: what if no one came? Her thoughts were interrupted as Jake finally sprang into action, breaking his paralysis of fear. "Sarah! Where are you?" His voice echoed through the shadows. Relief collided with dread. He had to be careful, they were both prey now. "Jake!" "Behind the register." She called, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tremors running through her body. She risked a glance back, but he didn't appear. Anxiety seized her as she stepped through the mess of knocked-over wares, stumbling against a shelf. Outside, darkness enveloped the station, but she had to reach the windows. The glass was her only means of escape. She ran, desperation fueling her flight. With the counter in sight, she prayed for safety, for light, anything to bat away the encroaching shadows, but as she pushed through, Jake's terrified face came into view, his expression distorted as he pointed behind her. She turned just in time to see the figure lunging forward, a swift, unnatural motion that brought it mere inches from her face. Time slowed as Sarah's scream ripped from her throat, an instinctual raw sound echoing in the suffocating air. She ducked, barely evading its grasp, and sprinted toward the back exit. She threw the door open, the night air slapping her face like a waking nightmare. The coolness soothed her burning skin, but dread embraced her as she glanced back. Had the figure followed? She strained her ears, listening for sounds of pursuit, heavy breathing, whispered threats, and the twisted laughter from legends that had suddenly come to life. "Sarah!" Jake's voice broke through the horror, filled with urgency but laced with something else. She turned, fleeting glimpses of hope flickering in her mind. He was alive. But the figure loomed in the distance, blacker than shadows, melding with the night. The sight rooted her in place, and hopelessness washed over her in waves. That was not all. Behind Jake, in the back aisles, more shadows emerged, figures morphing from the darkness, eyes glinting like hungry beasts. Just when she thought they were finally escaping, the sky rippled overhead, a low rumble of thunder grumbling ominously. The gas station felt like a trap, and she wondered if dawn would ever rise above this hell. As fear gripped her once more, she realized she had to make a choice. Would she leave Jake behind to save herself, or would she stand and fight against the nightmares haunting them both? The choice loomed, heavy with dread, as shadows closed in. The gas station flickered behind her, a sanctuary turned prison. In that moment, Sarah understood, something unspeakable lived within the walls. Whatever darkness awaited them, they could never truly escape. And then, the flickering lights went out entirely, plunging everything into darkness, silence filling the air like a thick fog. Would they face the terror together, or would this be the moment they were lost to the stories forever? Heart pounding in her chest, Sarah's world had narrowed to a pinprick of focus. Escape. Darkness closed in like a heavy blanket, stifling every sound except for the frantic thud of her pulse. The gas station that once offered familiar comforts now felt like a labyrinth of dread, shadows twisting and morphing as if they held malevolent intent. "Jake!" she hissed, afraid to raise her voice but desperate nonetheless. The silence was suffocating. Was he still behind her? Did he make it out of the gas station before the darkness claimed everything? A low growl rippled through the night. Not from the shadows, but from within the gas station itself. The monstrous figure had not followed them outside, but the echoes of its presence lingered. The fear wormed deeper, twisting in her stomach like a tightening vice. Suddenly, another shape emerged from the shadows, dragging her attention like a moth to flame. Jake stumbled out, wide-eyed and gasping, a thin sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked as if he had stared into the abyss and almost lost his mind. "Sarah! We have to go." He pulled her toward the crumbling exterior of the gas station, but she hesitated, casting a glance back. "No. We can't leave, there might be more of them." "More what?" Jake's voice was frantic. "What the hell are you talking about?" Just then, a rustling came from the nearby bushes, and they both froze. A dark form shifted closer, skeletal fingers extending from the maw of the shadows, reaching for the ground, for them. "Run!" Sarah gasped, the primal fear igniting her legs. They turned to sprint into the black void of the unknown, hearts racing like twin war drums. As they dashed away, the cold wind lashed against their faces, carrying echoes of laughter, a taunting sound that promised torment. The gas station faded into a memory behind them, swallowed by the deep night. But safety felt precarious, contingent upon moments rather than solid ground. "Why did we come this way?" Jake breathlessly asked, his voice tinged with regret and fear. "Why didn't we just stay in the car?" "Because I thought we'd be safe," she yelled, though she understood safety was an illusion born of naivety. "What was that thing in there?" It didn't look human," he faltered, his eyes haunted. Then dread washed over his face. "Sarah, are you feeling different?" A cold layer of sweat crept down her back. What was he talking about? She wanted to deny it, to reassure him that they could face this together, but she felt it too. A strange vibration in the air, a buzz that seemed to ripple through her skin, linking her to the unseen forces swirling around them. She touched her arm, breath hitching as a sliver of ice coursed through her veins. "We need to find someone. We can't be alone out here." But as they moved deeper into the woods, the laughter returned, echoing around them, wrapping them in its cruel embrace. The shadows had followed. They were not free yet. "Look!" Jake pointed at a flickering light far ahead. "Maybe it's another gas station, or a house." But as they stumbled closer, the light wavered erratically, as if it had a life of its own. Sarah's gut twisted in alarm. Shadows danced around it, morphing, writhing, as if whatever it was called to darkness. The laughter crescendoed, a chorus of chilling insanity. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, dread pooling in her chest. "Yeah." Jake's voice trembled. "What if it's another trap?" In that instant, fate turned again. The laughter reached a fever pitch, and the light exploded into a blinding glare. They shielded their eyes as a figure stepped into view, silhouetted against the illumination, a grotesque reflection of the gas station occupant, smiling, beckoning. "Join us, Sarah," it crooned, words dripping like poison. Sarah and Jake exchanged fearful glances, and without a word, they turned to flee. But as the echoes surrounded them, a horrifying realization dawned: there was no escape. Not from the shadows, not from the whirling laughter that promised to consume them. The ground beneath them shifted as if solid earth crumbled into darkness, and all they could do was run deeper into the unknown. But what awaited them next? Would they find safety, or were they about to unravel the horrors buried beneath the surface of their small-town nightmare? The laughter followed them, growing louder, an echo that resonated with the pulse of panic throbbing in Sarah's ears. Every step felt like running through syrup, slow and weighted, dread seeping into her bones. There was no direction, only the instinct-driven need to flee. "We can't stop," Jake shouted, his words cutting through the cacophony of fear. "I know. Just keep moving." But her energy was flagging. The light flickered behind them like a hypnotic pulse, drawing her gaze despite her terror. Each time she dared to look back, the grotesque figure hung in the glow, arms wide, like a dark angel. What kind of nightmare was this? The trees closed in, their gnarled branches reaching outward, claw-like, as if to snatch at their limbs. The air grew thicker, it wrapped around her throat like a noose, squeezing the breath from her lungs. "Sarah!" Jake's voice cracked, snapping her focus. "Do you see that?" She looked ahead, unsure what he meant. The dim light ahead glimmered now, seeming to promise shelter, refuge, but something in her gut warned her. "No. Not again. Stop." She rasped. It could be another trap. The laughter quickened its tempo, riding on the chilled night breeze. It morphed into voices, each syllable laced with pain and madness. "Join us, stay with us." Jake shook his head in desperate denial. "They want us to turn back. We can't let them in our heads." She barely registered his words, her mind spiraled with phantom fears, images of their entrapment. They were never alone. Was she still in control of her own mind, or had the darkness seeped into her thoughts like a slow poison? "Sarah!" He tugged at her arm, fear reflecting back from his wide eyes. She felt the icy touch of terror grip her heart. "Run!" The ground smoothed underfoot, unexpectedly flat. There. In the distance, a structure loomed, a shadowy outline contrasting sharply against a backdrop of swirling blackness. A house. They could find answers there, or at least a moment's reprieve. They sprinted toward it, breathless and desperate. The door hung slightly ajar, seeming to beckon them closer. A part of her screamed that it might be a trap, yet another part urged them onward, fear mirrored in her every thought. What if it's a dead end? Jake panted, glancing nervously behind them. "Then we fight." Sarah's resolve strengthened. She pushed through the door, heart racing as it creaked ominously. The air inside was stale, dust danced in the beams of moonlight streaming through the broken windows. Shattered furniture lay strewn across the room, remnants of a life abruptly forgotten. "Look for weapons," Jake whispered, urgency painting his tone. They split, searching the darkness that's alive, each shadow pulsating with unsettling energy. Sarah turned back to him, feeling a flicker of hope that they might find something: a knife, a tool. Anything. But as she scanned the room, the low growl they had heard earlier echoed faintly. The sound stirred something primal in her, an urge to flee, but she couldn't leave Jake. She shoved aside a wooden chair, revealing the twisted remnants of what was once a hunting knife, now caked in grime. She grabbed it, the metal cold against her palm. "Did you hear that?" Jake's voice hissed from the room's corner. Panic laced his words. "Yes. We need to go." As they came together, shadows surged forth from the corners, pooling and pulsating, rage emanating from them like heat. The laughter crescendoed again, drowning out her thoughts, merging with the growl. The figures solidified, a cacophony of grotesque faces twisting in agony, reaching for them with gnarled fingers. "Sarah!" Jake screamed as he was pulled back into darkness, the shadows consuming him. "Jake!" She yelled, panic spilling from her lips. But he was gone, swallowed whole. The dark laughter flooded her mind, and just as despair set in, an image flickered in the shadowed recesses. "Join them, Sarah!" She trembled, swallowing bile, hearing the twisted promise in the words. But as the shadows extended toward her, one desperate thought surged forward. She wouldn't give in. With a hoarse scream, she lashed out with the knife, aiming for the twisting darkness. The blade found a home, piercing silence fell like a shroud. In the chilling stillness, a thought struck her, heavy and cold. Where was Jake? What had happened to him in the clutches of the darkness, and could it already be too late for her? As the shadows writhed, she took a step backward, heart racing in anticipation of what might come next, not knowing she was still not alone in the house. The horror wasn't over. Not yet. What awaited in the corners of this nightmare? The silence hung like a thick fog, heavy and oppressive, swallowing any remaining traces of her sanity. Sarah's fingers trembled around the hunter's knife, poised at her side. She strained her ears, trying to catch any sound, but all she felt was that buried dread, silent yet deafening. "Jake!" she whispered, the name scraping against her throat. No answer, just a void that echoed back her fear. The shadows settled, but they didn't disappear. They hovered at the edges of her vision, watching, waiting. Taking a deep breath, she inched deeper into the room. Every creak of the floorboards below felt like a gunshot to her fragile nerves. Shadows swirled around her feet, playful yet malicious, whispering sweet nothings that clawed at the edge of her mind. She pushed the thoughts away. She had to stay focused. Find a way out. But the thought of escaping twisted her gut. How far could she go? The bounding laughter still dripped from the walls like a grotesque melody. It was a promise of despair, wrapping around her like a shroud. In the corner of the room, a figure lurked, partly concealed in the shadows. It stood still, too still. Sarah squinted, heart racing, straining to confirm if her fear had conjured a specter. Was it Jake? Jake? She called, more boldly this time, even as every ounce of bravery seeped away. The figure twisted unnaturally toward her, its head jerking like it was joined at odd angles. A glint of light reflected off something in its hand. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the twisted hobby knife, covered in something dark and sticky. Help, it rasped through cracked lips that didn't seem human. Join us. A shudder racked Sarah's body. It wasn't Jake. This thing wore his face like a mask, but it was wrong, so wrong. Panic surged, and she turned back toward the entrance just as tendrils of shadow crept closer, wrapping around her ankles like shackles. "Stay with us," the voice squeaked, a chorus of whispers emerging from the darkness, overlapping like twisted chants. "We'll never let you leave." Desperation clawed at her throat. She lunged toward the door, knife raised, slashing at the darkness encroaching on her. The laughter crescendoed, a manic symphony that filled her head. She felt their malice tightening like a vice, but when she reached out for the door handle, it slipped through her fingers. Was it a trick? A taunt? Cold despair settled in her bones as shadows began to swirl around her like an approaching storm. The figure lunged, and she barely dodged out of the way. A howling wail erupted, urging her to flee deeper into the house. She turned, nearly losing her balance, and darted through a door at the far end of the room. Light flickered in this new corridor, a grainy glow spilling from a window. Glimmers of hope surged. She was still alive. For now, that was all that mattered. Her heart thundered in her chest, pounding against her ribcage as she raced ahead, forgetting the pain in her side. The hallway ended in a small room dimly lit by a flickering bulb. Walls lined with dust-covered mirrors distorted her reflection, each image twisted and warped, pleading with her to stay. As she stumbled through the cramped space, a flush of cold air hit her back like ice water. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in a chamber of reflections. The laughter emerged again, louder, a cacophony of nightmarish mirth, echoing through the room. Sarah spun, frantically searching for an escape as panic rose. Every mirror held the shadows, each one laughing back at her with Jake's face twisted in torment. 1,000 voices chimed together, "Join us, don't leave, it's so much fun here." She pressed against the far wall, breath coming in ragged gasps, heart racing uncontrollably. "No. I won." She shouted defiantly, yet uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. But even as she steeled herself against the torment, a new realization clawed its way into her mind, cold and horrifying. If they were here with her now, what horrors awaited in the dark? With no way out and the laughter closing in, another figure lurked from behind, creeping closer toward her. Its breath was a whisper, a sigh, barely louder than the shadows surrounding her. Sarah, the name slithered from the lips of her darkest fears. Was she really alone? The knife trembled in her grip, heart pounding against impending doom as the figure stepped into the dim light. What would she do next? As the shadows began to converge, the final question hung like a noose around her neck. Who would leave this forsaken place and who would stay? The figure that emerged from the shadows wore a smile that was anything but reassuring. It had Jake's eyes, yet they gleamed with a darkness that sent ripples of fear crashing through Sarah. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as laughter rang in her ears, blending with desperate whispers. Sarah, the voice mimicked her own, sweet like honey but laced with venom. Join us, it's so much better when you stop fighting. Fighting? She had to keep fighting. Keep moving. But her legs felt heavy, as though the very ground were urging her to submit. The mirrors twisted around her, the reflections warping her fear into something monstrous. Get away from me. Forcing herself to breathe, she raised the knife, its blade glinting under the flickering light, gripped tightly in her trembling hand. Come on, don't be rude. We're just trying to have some fun. The figure stepped closer, swaying slightly, a grotesque dance that made her skin crawl. With each step, shadows ballooned around its form, coiling like serpents eager to strike. Sarah backed up against the wall, her heart thudding like a war drum. The mirrors showed her terrifying versions of herself, broken, twisted, lost in torment. The laughter echoed, amplifying her panic. Frantically, she glanced around, scanning for an escape. Behind the figure, the delicate outline of a door caught her eye, hidden behind a mirror. It was her only chance. She could make it if she timed it right. In a burst of adrenaline, she lunged toward the side, aiming for the door. The figure turned with a snarl, shadows stretching out to grab her. Sarah felt cold fingers brushing her ankle, but she pushed through, heart racing with raw determination. Don't leave, you belong here. The voices shrieked, melding together in a cacophony of betrayal that chased her down the narrow corridor. Reaching the door, she flung it open, stumbling onto a creaky staircase that spiraled upwards into darkness. Each step felt like an eternity, sending shards of panic coursing through her veins. She had no idea where it led, but the laughter behind her dimmed, if only slightly. The light from above beckoned, flickering under a thin layer of dust. She raced upward, driven by sheer instinct. As she reached the top, she gasped for breath. The hallway was long with doors lining both sides. What do I do now? She whispered to herself, pulse thundering in her ears. Confusion washed over her. Each door was uniquely ominous. She could sense stories waiting to be unearthed behind them, stories wrapped in terror, in despair. A chill brushed her neck, and she spun, heart in her throat. Sarah, the voice echoed softly, caressing her ears like a wicked lullaby. Panic clawed at her. This place was alive, breathing with her fear. Shadows danced along the wall, twisting into grotesque shapes that beckoned her to stay. Help me, it whispered, sending icy tendrils down her spine. She didn't recognize it, yet something about the call reached deep into her soul, unsettling her. Her feet were rooted in place, heart pounding a drumbeat of dread. What if she opened one of the doors? What would come for her? The laughter began to rise again around her, echoing, curling like smoke through the air. Join us. Sarah's grip on the knife tightened, a surge of defiance igniting within her. She took a step forward. The shadows merged into a sea of darkness, each swirl threatening to swallow her whole. I will not. She shouted into the void. But two figures emerged from the shadows behind her, each bearing the contours of familiar faces, eyes gleaming with a manic joy that chilled her bones. Why fight us, Sarah? We can offer you everything you desire. The air grew suffocating as the laughter intensified, a storm of malicious delight. Sarah felt the grip of despair closing in again, a noose tightening around her. One door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping, igniting a flicker of hope. But as she turned towards it, she paused. A sudden thought crashed down on her like a weight. What if she opened it and the shadows rushed out? What was on the other side? With time slipping away, she faced the twisted laughter, gripping the knife. Was it worth the risk, or was she sealing her fate? In that moment of uncertainty, the walls seemed to breathe. And then, from behind the voices of despair, a new sound emerged. It was her own voice. Open the door. The words echoed off the walls, a cruel twist of fate that seemed to mock her bravery. Open the door. The shadows flickered, pulsating with anticipation as if the darkness itself were rooting for her, eager to swallow her whole. Sarah's heart raced, a wild drum against her ribcage. The door loomed larger, light spilling from its gap like an invitation to salvation or damnation. With every moment, the sinister grins of her pursuers sharpened. She could feel the air, thick and alive, wrapped around her throat like a noose. She swallowed hard. Open it. Her own voice was a whisper now, tinged with desperate yearning. Drawing in a breath, she lunged forward. The knife felt heavier, a symbol of her defiance, yet the weight of doubt clawed at her resolve. She reached out, trembling fingers trembling towards the doorknob. Then came a rush of wind, chilling and stinging, slapping her face like betrayal. The laughter crescendoed. "No. Don't, you'll regret it," came the voice of one of the figures, twisted and serpentine, echoing around her like a funeral dirge. Sarah hesitated, a thin sliver of fear forcing her fingers to jerk back. What lay behind that door? Was it freedom, or was it worse? "Join us, Sarah." The two figures whispered in harmony, their voices a melody of madness that tugged at her sanity. "We can offer comfort. We can offer home." Panic surged. She had to escape, but the shadows advanced, swirling around her ankles, clenching tighter with every heartbeat. Each breath felt labored, weighted with the thickness of dread that filled the hallway. She glanced at the door again, knuckles white around the knife, eyes wide. Time spun around her like an eerie carousel, twisting her fear into a spiraling dance. She could feel the pull, the seduction of giving in, of belonging. A distant thud echoed, quickening her pulse. The hallway was no longer silent. There were footsteps, shuffling and stumbling, reverberating from deep within the dark. "Sarah!" A familiar voice gasped from the distance. Her mother. Jake. Her heart twisted painfully at the thought of her loved ones calling for her. "Don't abandon us." The figures were right behind her now, shadows brushing against her skin, their laughter turning sharp, like nails on glass. Cold dread washed over her. What if this was all a trap, another dark deception? The door was still there, emitting a smoldering warmth despite the encroaching cold. "Sarah!" The voice cried out again, louder, more desperate. It was near, too close. She spun around, and her mother's figure materialized from the shadows, a specter of worry etched deeply on her face. "Follow me," she urged. But something about her mother's eyes held a glimmer of malevolence. "Join us," the sinister chorus echoed, laughter bubbling with muted anticipation. An inner conflict raged within Sarah. Her senses screamed for her to choose quickly, to take action without yielding to fear. But the tangled emotions threatened to consume her entirely. "Which way?" she shrieked. "What do I believe?" A hush fell over the chaos, the laughter fading like mist. In that silence, opportunity lingered. The door a flickering promise of something more, or more of the same. She couldn't ignore the tension in her muscles, the knife quivering in her grip. With the figures closing in, Sarah's breath hitched. She shot forward, heart hammering as her hand reached for the doorknob once more. As her fingers brushed against the cold metal, sharp laughter erupted. "Open it, Sarah. Open it." And then it clicked. Suddenly, the world around her seemed to warp, a jarring crack in reality. What awaited her on the other side? With one final push from the depth of her essence, she turned the knob. The door swung open. And darkness lunged. A cold gust of wind surged through the doorway, consuming Sarah's senses as she stumbled into the void. It was an abyss, a cloister of dull, colorless shadows. The laughter faded, replaced by a suffocating stillness that gripped her throat. The door slammed shut behind her, isolating her in a silence so complete it felt like a physical presence pressing down on her chest. Her heart raced while she took slow, shuddering breaths. The darkness was thick like a heavy blanket, wrapping around her every thought. Panic started to creep in, gnawing at her resolve. Was she truly alone? She forced herself to move, each step hesitant, scraping the soles of her shoes against a gritty surface. Then she noticed it, a faint glimmer ahead. A sliver of light cutting through the encroaching blackness. Instinctively, she stumbled toward it, drawn by a desperate need for illumination. The light flickered, mimicking a dying ember, wavering and uncertain, yet it was the only grasp on hope she had. As she approached, she barely felt the floor shift beneath her feet, a sensation like moving through quicksand. The shadows clung, coiling around her limbs, whispering faintly in a cacophony of familiar voices, "Join us, stay with us, no." She shouted, her voice reverberating eerily in the constrained space. The brightness was real, and it called out to her like a lighthouse on a stormy night. The light illuminated a doorway that split the air apart in front of her, a threshold to something unknown. She gripped the knife tightly, the cold handle grounding her when everything else felt like it was slipping away, but just as her fingers brushed the edge of the doorframe, the ground beneath her crumbled a chilling sound, like aged bones snapping. She scrambled back, narrowly avoiding falling into the yawning abyss that now threatened to swallow her whole. In that disorienting moment, something moved in her peripheral vision. A figure. Tall and gliding, formed of the very essence of the darkness itself. It turned slowly, revealing eyes that glowed faintly like dying stars, piercing into her soul. Something primal within her screamed, urging her to run, but the weight of despair rooted her feet to the ground. "Don't be afraid," the entity's voice slid through the air, smooth yet filled with malice. "You've already accepted your fate by opening that door. Get away from me." Sarah's voice cracked, the knife shaking in her grip. But the figure remained still, watching, waiting, as if taunting her. "Your loved ones are waiting, Sarah. They're so close. If only you let go of that stubborn defiance, you could join them." A whirlwind of memories flooded her mind, her mother's laughter, Jake's soothing presence. But along with that warmth came dread, a gnawing instinct that urged her to resist, to reject the sweet poison masked in comfort. Behind the figure, shadows stirred, and she could barely make out more forms emerging, their mouths twisted into grotesque smiles, echoing that same haunting laughter from before. They reached out, fingers extended, urging her to step forward. In that moment, clarity exploded in Sarah's mind like fireworks in the dark. She understood that wherever this place led, it wouldn't be to salvation. It was a trap, a web spun from the silken threads of her own doubts and fears. With newfound determination, she sprang backward, propelled by a surge of adrenaline, hands gripping the knife with a fierce resolve. "You don't own me!" she screamed, her voice a clarion call against the encroaching darkness, but the figures didn't flinch. They began to chant, their voices merging in a dissonant harmony that built into a deafening crescendo. Join us, heart pounding." She spun back toward the doorway, the flickering light now a beacon of desperation. Could she escape? Would she even have a choice? With a frantic burst of energy, Sarah lunged toward the light, the warmth beckoning her as she dove through the roiling shadows. As she reached for the door, she felt a chill grip her, trying to pull her back. Was this freedom? Or just another layer of the nightmare? The threshold began to close, and in that last heartbeat, her question echoed, what if this is all just a beginning? A scream erupted behind her as she flung herself through the doorway, the darkness snapping at her heels. What waited for her on the other side? Sarah tumbled through the threshold, landing hard on a cold, unyielding floor. The sudden rush of light enveloped her, seeking to drown out the haunting shadows that lurked behind. She blinked, her surroundings coming into focus. It was a dimly lit gas station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting a harsh glare on a cracked linoleum floor. An eerie silence blanketed the place, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator in the corner. She lurched to her feet, scanning the desolate aisles lined with dust-coated snacks and stale magazines. The air felt stale, heavy with the scent of the rubbery hot dogs that had probably been spinning on their grill for too long. "Hello." Her voice wobbled, echoing off the walls. No answer, only the dull thud of her heart pulsing in her ears. As she ventured further in, dread pooled in the pit of her stomach. Where was everyone? The gas pumps outside were intact, the neon sign flickering insistently, but the darkness from before, it felt like a remnant, a whisper lurking just outside the flickering lights. Rounding the corner, she spotted the counter, a familiar sight that brought flashes of normalcy. Behind it, a bell tinkled, but no one responded. Nobody stood guard over the register, and her fingers twitched toward the knife still clutched in her hand. The electrical crackle of the lights overhead flickered again, and in the mirrored surface of the display case, something moved. She turned sharply, knife raised. Anyone there? Silence filled the space before she heard a low, drawn-out chuckle. It came from the far end of the store, nearing the restroom door. Was it a customer? Or something else? She felt exposed, trembling. Hello? Is someone there? She called again, more desperate now. The restroom door creaked open, an ominous sound as a figure stepped into the light. It was a man, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes that glinted like shards of glass. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something wrong, something lurking deep below the surface of his grin. Lost, are we? His voice was smooth, almost syrupy, and a chill spiraled down Sarah's spine. Just passing through, she replied, unwilling to let him see how afraid she was. But he stepped closer, the smell of decay wafting toward her, and she recoiled. Oh, but this place is welcoming. Everyone's dying to stay. He gestured back toward the restroom, the air around him thickening. Sarah instinctively took a step back, her breath quickening. I'm not staying. His smile widened, revealing crooked teeth. But are you sure? They would love to meet you. As he stepped into the light, shadows flickered around him like old film. The restroom door swung ajar behind him, and she caught a glimpse. Dark figures emerged, shifting, contorting in grotesque shapes. Laughter spilled out, a cacophony of voices, twisted and familiar, echoing her own fears. Panic surged. She needed to escape, but the exit felt miles away. The man's eyes didn't leave her, filled with a knowing malevolence that sent a rush of terror through her. Join us, he said. Then she heard it again, the chant resonating from the shadows, pulling at her, wrapping around her ankles like chains. Join us. Before she could react, Sarah turned and sprinted toward the exit, her heart pounding. She could hear the laughter echoing, haunting, growing louder as if the entire gas station conspired against her. She burst through the door, mouth dry, limbs trembling, but the night air hit her with a violent chill. The gas station parking lot spread out before her, empty and foreboding. The world outside was different too, shrouded in shadows that twisted like dark fingers reaching out to grasp her. But before she could take another step, she heard it again behind her. It's not over, Sarah. Before she could look back, the lights in the gas station flickered, and the whole place began to vibrate with laughter, her own laughter distorted and echoing off into the night. As Sarah glanced back, her breath caught in her throat. The shadows pooled at the entrance, taking form as the figures from her worst nightmare. Would she ever be free from them? Or was the real terror just beginning to unfold? Sarah stumbled into the cold night, heart hammering against her ribcage. She looked back at the gas station, its flickering lights casting a macabre glow over the darkness, a hellish beacon she couldn't shake from her mind. The memories of the laughter, those faces twisted in torment, replayed like a haunting symphony in her ears. Every step felt weighted, every breath thick with dread. Had she really escaped? Or was this just another layer of the nightmare? Outside, the world looked different. Shadows danced across the pavement, seeming to curl and twist with a life of their own, beckoning. It's not over, Sarah. Echoed in her mind. She clenched the knife tighter, the cold metal grounding her in fleeting moments of clarity. She needed a plan. She couldn't run blindly forever. The whispers from the gas station tugged at her resolve, promises of warmth and belonging laced with danger. They knew fear, she felt their hunger. But Sarah wasn't ready to feed into their twisted games. Not this time. Resolute, she turned toward the path running beside the gas station, desperation fueling her steps. The woods loomed ahead, intimidating but familiar. If she could just disappear into the trees, maybe she could outrun whatever followed. She sprinted, the underbrush cracking beneath her feet, heart thundering like a drum as she plunged deeper into the woods. Darkness swallowed her whole, branches whipping against her skin. She paused only to catch her breath, lungs heaving as she pressed a palm against the rough bark of a tree to steady herself. The gas station was a memory fading behind her, but still, she could sense the shadows lurking near. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the depths of the trees. It was Jake, wild-eyed and ragged, relief flooding her senses. "Sarah!" he yelled, arms outstretched, but as he stumbled closer, shadows twisted around him, swirling like a tempest. "Get back!" she shouted, knife raised, panic bubbling. A clawing dread settled in her gut. Was he real? "Sarah, it's me," he pleaded, voice strained. "I thought I lost you." "Don't let them in, Jake. They're trying to deceive you." Out of nowhere, laughter filled the air again. It echoed through the trees, a cruel mockery that sent shivers down her spine. Behind Jake, the darkness shifted, faces appearing, mouths twisted in those malevolent grins. "Join us, Jake," they chanted, voices layered with despair and malice. I can't stop it." Jake faltered, stepping deeper into the shadows, eyes fogging as he struggled against their pull. "No." Sarah lunged forward, gripping his arm before he could fully succumb. "Fight it. We're stronger together." In that critical moment, something sparked within him, a flicker of recognition. His eyes focused on her, and determination settled back into his gaze. "I won to let them win." They spun together, sprinting back toward the gas station, desperate to reclaim their refuge. Shadows chased, seething around them, desperate to ensnare them both. "Almost there," Sarah shouted, intensity spurring her faster. She could see the flickering sign ahead, more than just a building now, it was a battlefield, their lives resting on the outcome. As they reached the entrance, shadows lunged with a chilling fury, swirling around them, but Sarah steeled herself and pressed inside. The door slammed shut behind them, barricading the darkness outside. The gas station was in disarray, lights stuttering as if responding to an unseen force. They could feel the weight of unseen eyes monitoring their every move. "Where do we go?" Jake gasped, panic threading into his words. "Together," Sarah said defiantly. "But we need to confront the darkness." She turned to face the gathering shadows, knife raised. "You want to take us?" From every corner, figures emerged, shadows of lost souls, desperate to reclaim what they had lost. Hollow voices rose, chanting, join us," but fear only sharpened her resolve. Sarah and Jake stood as one, carving out a space amidst the whirlpool surrounding them. "You'll never have us," they shouted in unison, the power of their connection igniting flickers of light against the encroaching darkness. With one fierce movement, they plunged the knife into the ground, western sun's light cascading through the cracks of reality. The shadows rippled, recoiling at the outburst of brilliance. "Let this be our choice," they cried out together, and light illuminated their hearts, drowning the laughter in the brilliance of their defiance. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then, the shadows dissolved like mist at dawn. Light surged through the gas station, banishing the whispers, the fear, the temptation. The air cleared, weight lifting as hope seeped in. Jake turned, eyes gleaming with disbelief. "We did it. We fought back." Sarah smiled through the tears that blurred her vision. "We're free." But as they stepped outside, glancing back at the now solid gas station, they knew the remnants of their experience lingered. "Together," Jake said, linking their hands. "Moving forward." Sarah nodded, the knife falling from her fingers as they walked into the early morning light, no longer shadows but two survivors breaking the dawn, and as they left, echoes of laughter faded into memory, a reminder of their strength, their fight, and the bond that held on, even in the darkest nights. With every step forward, they chose life, leaving the gas station behind as nothing but a chapter closed. A testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but the stories never truly end, and as they disappeared into the light, the whispers remained. Don't forget to share this journey with your friends. And listen up, you need to subscribe now if you don't want to miss more exclusive stories with unexpected twists and deep emotions. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and help us grow. You don't want to be left behind, do you? Flood the comments with your thoughts, your theories about what happens next. And for the love of storytelling, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second.